Today we've got an awesome topic on kind of loneliness and solitude, how they're different, and how we can try to live our lives in a way that's kind of the best for us in terms of finding solitude, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about is almost kind of necessary for our well-being. But yeah, in terms of loneliness, I think we can all say that there's so many times in our lives where we've felt alone, and how those feelings can often just feel like emptiness, isolation, abandonment, and how solitude is just kind of the state of being alone, but it carries the connotation of being more at peace and tranquil and feel that comfort. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about how we can move from a state of loneliness and kind of that depression that kind of comes with it to a pleasant state of solitude today. We are going to be recording this, so please know that you're not going to be showing up if you're a participant today. We're going to be talking about any questions that you have, so if you do have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A form in the bottom here, or feel free to put it in the chat, and we're going to get to those in the last 15 minutes or so. And we're going to be sharing everything that we've got here on a YouTube channel. We're going to record the whole thing, but we're also going to be putting clips on our social media if you want to share anything with friends that you got from today's presentation. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists here. To start, we've got Billy Chapata. He is a Zimbabwean writer, best-selling author, and creative based in Atlanta, Georgia. Billy's work aims to touch on the concepts of love, healing, connections, and growth. And he does that through poetry, storytelling, and narrative. Writing came into his life as a means of substance, self-love, and empowerment. And he writes to heal, to grow, and to survive. I love that mission so much, Billy. That's really awesome. Ashley McMann is a licensed professional counselor and owner of Mindful Living Therapy in Austin, Texas. She works with children, adolescents, young adults, and families, and specializes in anxiety, ADHD, behavioral concerns, depression, relationships, and trauma. During her free time, she enjoys hikes with her fur baby Harper, and socializing with her book club and running. And last but not least, we've got Sadaf Siddiqi. She is a psychotherapist and consultant in a private practice. She's also behind Being, a digital mental health brand. Through her work, she makes an effort to normalize mental health and the emotions that we all experience. Sadaf works with people individually, in groups, and through organizations to cultivate change through education, intention, and compassion. She also creates content to raise awareness and share wellness tips. When she's not talking about feelings, Sadaf loves reading, hiking, and live music. I love that. So, I mean, one thing I'll say is that the way that I just kind of described each one of you, you all kind of mentioned some things that incorporated some element of like solitude. Like a lot of us will find that peace and tranquility through solitude and hiking or running or reading. But also there is like a coming together piece of what each one of you kind of talk about. And I think one thing I would love to start off with is in terms of kind of finding that balance of kind of solitude and connectedness, like how do you find that area that's the sweet spot? Because I mean, and this is something I'd love to talk even more about, is like, is loneliness necessarily too much solitude, or would you say loneliness is something completely separate? So I would love to start off with, I mean, Ashley, if you want to kick us off, like describe either one of those. I know I kind of started off with two questions there, but would love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, just kind of define loneliness to me. A lot of times people define loneliness as being alone, but to me, loneliness is feeling unseen and unheard. Like you can be in a room with a ton of people and still feel very lonely. I mean, I think even in my life, some of the times I felt the loneliest is with someone right next to me. And solitude is more being comfortable and peaceful, being by yourself and alone. for me, it's been like trial and error, finding that balance, kind of like figuring out, okay, really listening to my body, burnout when I'm like an introverted extrovert. So when my like battery is starting to drain, and then over the years, learning how to set boundaries and say, no, I'm not going to go do this social event. I'm going to stay home and spend time by myself. So it takes time to figure out like that perfect balance. At least for me, that's kind of what I've experienced.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, it's like that expression, I'm sure everyone here has heard it, of the alone together kind of phenomenon. Like you can, like you were saying, be in a room full of people, like at a party or even, and
Mm-hmm.
still kind of have those feelings of loneliness. I mean, Sadaf, do you have anything that you'd want to add?
I definitely agree with what Ashley said, but loneliness is interesting because it is this universal but very unique to each person kind of experience. And we have all felt lonely at some point in our life. And if we haven't yet, we definitely will. And it's kind of not talked about enough, given that it is something that everyone will have. So I don't know why we don't have more conversations like these about loneliness and shifting that to solitude, but like skipping that isolation step in the middle, right? And I don't know if that's even possible. Maybe you have to have a little isolation to get to solitude to figure out what that balance looks like for you. I'm personally still figuring out. But as a therapist, I think I am very attuned to figure out what's happening in my body that is making me kind of pull away from other people, withdraw. And those are the things that I look for when I think about, well, is this solitude, or am I like kind of becoming internal, like a hermit in not the most healthy way?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think that's the other crazy phenomenon that we have going on right now is you would think in this day and age, when we should be the most connected we ever have been with all the different forms of communication and everything, we can still almost as like a gut reaction sometimes go completely 180 and choose to kind of isolate ourselves, even though we have all these ways to stay in touch. And I mean, Billy, do you have anything that you would kind of say along these lines?
Yeah, I think Ashley and Sadaf brought up really great points. It's interesting when you talk about loneliness and solitude because it really is something very unique to each person. Something that could be seen as, you know, something lonely to me could be something really just, you know, something that someone thrives in, a space that someone thrives in, or something that could be solitude to me could be something that someone feels very lonely, even just practicing. So it is very interesting. But I think probably the thing that I really take home, especially from what Ashley and Sadaf said, which I resonate with, is the fact that it is a learning process. It takes some time to really find that balance between solitude and loneliness, because I find myself, because I'm generally just an introvert, a lot of the things that I tend to just step back and just do would be things that a lot of people would say, well, that feels kind of lonely. I'm like, no, that's it for me. I love doing this. It gives me back so much time to recharge and re-energize, but also finding that medium and knowing like whether what you're doing is actually, you know, kind of inhibiting you in a sense, or, you know, is unhealthy kind of solitude, because I think that there is such a thing. But yeah, I believe it's definitely a balance and definitely something that is, you know, takes some time to kind of master. I don't know if you ever do actually master it.
I mean, I think this is a huge $100 million question. It's like, how do you develop that kind of personal compass to like really know? Well, first, it's like you have to have a barometer of knowing, like, all right, am I in solitude or am I like encroaching into loneliness territory? But then having that kind of self-awareness to be able to point you in the right direction of like, okay, I know what I'm experiencing right now, so what can I do to really kind of pull me out of this state of loneliness into whether it's feeling more solitude or okay, I think at this point I know I need to reconnect and I need to re-engage. Like, do you all have any tips that you've kind of worked on either for yourselves or with clients that you feel like are things that you would generally recommend or best practices for something like that? Like Sadaf, I don't know if you have anything that you would share here.
Yeah, so one thing that I encourage all of my clients to do is every morning when they wake up, do something very simple, which is a quick check-in with themselves. Ask themselves 2 questions. What do I need? How do I feel? And this doesn't need to be an elaborate response or a journal question. It's simply, how do I feel and what do I need? Without having that self-awareness of what's going on and what can actually help you, you might not really know how to address things like loneliness if that's coming up, because there are so many different factors for why loneliness happens. Like Ashley was saying, you could be around other people but still feel lonely. So maybe in that moment you don't actually need social connection. Maybe you need connection with yourself. But until you actually ask yourself the difficult question and then are honest in answering it, I don't know if you're going to know what to do next necessarily, right? You might just be trial and erroring, which is fine, but that check-in with yourself, I think, is really key for identifying, okay, am I feeling lonely because I haven't been authentic to myself? Or because, I'm disconnected from my partner, or I've had a lot of social interactions, but I haven't had any, alone time with myself. So really figuring out, well, how do I feel and what do I need, I think is just a great way to start your day or end it, depending on, if you're a morning person or evening person.
I love that. Yeah. And like having that daily ritual is something that I feel like will really kind of help ground that whole process in there. And I think that's a really great suggestion. I mean, Ashley, do you have anything that you would add to that?
I'm similar to what Sadaf said. I have a check-in like every morning that I do with myself too, or I try to. Sometimes it doesn't always happen. To just kind of ask myself, what can I do today to be my best self or to be true to myself? Something that I've also personally have done over the last year really is I noticed in social situations, kind of how I mentioned, I still felt very lonely because I wasn't maybe with individuals that were the type of people that I wanted to be, or I was in rooms where I didn't feel like I fit in. So something I've really focused on is finding individuals that are who I want to become, or that bring out those like positive qualities of myself. So setting really firm boundaries with who I allow access to me and how much access. Then also it's just seeking out people that make me feel at peace and make me feel comfortable. Because I think that helps a lot. And even when I'm at home and I'm by myself, I can like reflect on it and I feel fulfilled alone because I feel fulfilled in these other areas as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you raised an interesting point too, though, is like, okay, so one, like identifying that safe space, that like that safe environment with safe people and all of that. And then, but two, it's like there's almost like a certain level of vulnerability that is needed in order to kind of be at peace with that. And I think that's a really kind of two-way street way to look at it, is like sometimes it's like the first step is to like figure that like environment out that is going to work well for me. But then two, it's like actually showing up and allowing yourself to be seen. And I think that can be a really huge factor into kind of making solitude time very healthy, but also your connected time being healthy. And I mean, I don't want to pivot too much here, but I would love to talk a little bit more about like technology and how technology has kind of changed the way that we experience that connectedness versus lonely and isolated feelings. Because something that we talked about in our last group chat on social media usage is, I mean, we can be on social media all day, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're communicating. Like there's like the active form of social media where we're sending messages back and forth to friends and we're really communicating well with people. But then there's like the passive side where it's just kind of scrolling through and mindlessly just kind of going through there. Like, would you all say that you have any kind of guardrails in place that kind of help you out with using technology for good so you don't fall into that kind of isolated, lonely trap, and kind of stay more in line with, okay, this is my solitude time. So how can I kind of use technology for good here? Like, do you all have any kind of tips or best practices that you do? And I mean, Billy, I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
kick this
I
off.
mean, sure. I'd love to answer that. I think there's a variety of things because I don't think there's just one practice which makes it very simple to kind of do that. It's interesting because technology kind of creates this illusion that we're a lot more connected to each other than we really are. So for me, what I found really useful is just a lot of social media breaks. That is very, very useful for me. I've also found that just kind of taking the time to, I love writing, obviously, and most of my work is online, but just taking the time to do other stuff that I love and kind of give back time to that allows me to kind of just distance myself a little bit or disengage from technology. But really taking breaks is the biggest thing for me, and setting that intentional time away from social media and technology just to do things that I love, just to rediscover me again. Because just social media and technology can be pretty jarring sometimes. It can be pretty monotonous, and just really take you away from yourself too. So I found that just breaks really help me a lot just in my line of work because I'm online so much. That's like so key to me. So that's definitely one practice, but I feel like there's so many different practices. But for me, that's just really been the key one that really hits home.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, again, I think that's like another very intentional action, like whether it's starting your day with kind of those prompts and those affirmations, or kind of saying like, no, I know once I reach this limit, I need to take that break. And I love the idea of just kind of having those like very intentional actions. Like, Sadaf, I don't know if you have anything else that you would add to what Billy just said there, but I feel
Yeah.
like you definitely would have some more tips here.
Well, the breaks thing is a great idea. For me personally, it's hard to implement. So what I've done is I've just turned off all notifications for social media. So when I go, I have to intentionally go in and open it. And so that's helped me a lot, because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to take breaks. I know myself, and I tried it and it didn't work. So for me, the best thing, the most effective thing has really just been taking off the notifications. So then my brain isn't like receiving these messages about like, oh, I need to do this. It's just in my time, and go and open it up. And then the other thought that came to mind when Billy was speaking was that, loneliness is something that also comes from comparing yourself to others. And on social media, I mean, you see such a small snippet of someone's life, but for some reason, our brains are always like, no, that's their full life. How they are in this like one, in this like one feed is their life. And it's a very lonely and isolating experience to be like, well, I don't have this, right? Depending on the transitional points of your life. If you're single, you're like, I'm not married. And if you want kids and you see someone with kids, all of those things kind of isolate you, and they lead to loneliness. And social media is the base of that. So I don't have all the answers on best way to limit or just at least be intentional about your time. But I think taking breaks and, really monitoring notifications can probably be a good step if someone is not sure where to start.
I think another great practical suggestion, probably something that a lot of people are like, I feel like I know I should do that, but hopefully hearing it from you kind of gives them the inspiration to move forward with that.
Or start with do not disturb.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. At least that won't ring.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, as therapists, I mean, I don't know about you all, but it's pretty common just to like leave your phone in the other room. And I mean, Billy, I imagine as a writer, like there are times where you're just like, you know what? Nope, I'm setting these boundaries here. I need to make sure I get in the zone and focus on this. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Because we've become so dependent on technology now to a point where just even our basic, just the basic things we usually tend to, or just the things in our line of work. For instance, my writing, if my notifications aren't off, like Sadaf just said, it's it completely just distracts me, takes me out of the mood or the vibe I was in, and it just kind of derails me. So it's so important to just set that intentional time aside, and also just to, just do whatever it takes practice wise, whether it's turning off your notifications or, just not logging onto your phone or whatever. So important. So yeah.
And it takes time. If you do one of those, the first time that you do it, you might be very like tempted to undo it quickly because it feels almost overwhelming to not have that, that distraction right away. So it takes time and it takes a lot of practice. They say it takes 21 days to make a habit. So it will probably take that long for you to really say, okay, the distractions are off, the breaks are a part of just my routine now.
Yeah, and it's like building that muscle memory and kind of getting that. I mean, our minds work the same way, and I think that's a really great point. Actually, something that I'm really interested in asking you is someone who works with the whole age range from children to adults. Have you kind of noticed, are there any kind of separations in how people in different ages kind of experience loneliness and solitude, and how they're able to like kind of work themselves towards more healthy patterns there? Or would you say it's kind of generally across the board pretty much the same?
No, I would say for teenagers in particular, it's pretty difficult, just because, as we all know, our mindset at that age is very irrational. And trying to tell a teen to, unfollow certain people or mute certain people or reduce social media time is like asking for them to, move mountains. So I think it's definitely different for that age group. I have noticed, just especially because of the pandemic, with like younger age groups who maybe, because when we think about it, there's going to be this whole generation of children that their first 2 to 3 years of life were almost like in isolation. And they're going to have to learn how to socialize and how to just communicate in certain ways. So that's been interesting for me. And so it's almost like the opposite issue is now they're kind of like teaching them how to not be alone and how to put themselves out there more. It's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is part of the problem, especially in a world that we currently live in that's so digitally based, is it's kind of the cultural norm at this point. And gosh, I forget. There's a writer that moved to Africa. I mean, this was just before the pandemic, and he was surprised at like how moving from New York City to Kenya completely changed his mind on how he saw that he was in kind of connection with others. And he realized, even living in one of the most dense cities in the world, in New York City, he was probably the loneliest that he's ever been. And when he moved to Africa, he had to get his refrigerator fixed. And it wasn't like New York where he could just go on Yelp and look up refrigerator repairman and just send a text message to a Yelp recommendation, tell the doorman downstairs, like, let this guy in and he can fix the fridge. He doesn't even have to make contact with the repairman. Versus when he moved to Africa, he had to ask his neighbor, like, hey, my refrigerator broke. What do I do? His neighbor said, oh, my cousin knows a guy. So here, reach out to my cousin. Like, he's down the street there. He went to his neighbor's cousin, and his neighbor's cousin was like, oh, I don't know the guy that does, but you need to talk to this guy who has the parts for that. And then he might know a repairman. He ended up talking to about 10 different people. And like, I mean, talk about a way to like forcefully get yourself out of kind of that state of loneliness. So, I mean, I think that's going back to what you were kind of saying with kind of bucking the cultural norms, is like the easy way is oftentimes the path that kind of is harming us. And I think a couple of you have kind of mentioned ways that we can kind of be more self-aware of how to kind of build some safeguards around realizing how the easy way may not be the best for us. But I mean, All right, and just a heads up, everyone, we're going to be opening up the Q&A here in a little bit. So if people want to drop any questions in the Q&A or chat box below, please feel free to do so. So yeah, I mean, I think we've talked quite a bit about kind of technology-wise ways that we're kind of working on loneliness and solitude. But outside of technology, I know a couple of you mentioned that you love to like hike and run. What are some things that you do to kind of help you experience kind of that healthy solitude? And Billy, I imagine with your writing, you probably experienced some serious healthy solitude there.
Yeah, I mean I love to hike as well. I love seeing different kinds of just animals. I love nature. And yeah, just a lot of that just gives me time to myself, spending time with, loved ones, my family. Um, that allows me to recharge. I'm very simplistic in that sense. I don't have to do anything over the top. And maybe it's just because of my introverted nature. But what I found is, yeah, a lot of the things that help me just reconnect with myself are just really simple tasks. Like just might be watching a favorite show that I haven't watched in a while or something. But like I said, taking hikes, going on nature trails, going to museums. I love going to museums, visiting different cities, different libraries in different cities. I love that. But it's funny because my writing is kind of what allows me to kind of enter that space of solitude. So it's strange. I find myself kind of exercising solitude without knowing I'm exercising solitude. And it's strange. So a lot sometimes it's really intentional. Other times it's just like honestly just accident. I'm writing and I just feel so at peace right there and then. And that's just solitude for me. No one's around me. I'm able to just put my thoughts on paper. And that works like really well for me. So it's a little strange, but yeah, that's kind of how it works for me.
I think that's awesome that you've kind of managed to, I mean, it takes self-awareness to kind of catch yourself in the moment to be able to say like, hey, I'm experiencing like this is good here. So just like completely being in that flow.
Yeah,
And I mean, would you say that there are points where it can go overboard and you all of a
absolutely.
sudden realize, yeah, it's like, oh gosh, I should not have been alone this long.
Absolutely. I what I feel and what I tend to see is when I start to feel really tired, or I just feel like really uninspired, or I just feel, my body usually tells me.
Mm.
When I start to feel anything that's just not really me, not really Billy, that's when I kind of know like I've just really been either dedicating too much time to this, or the connection that I should be feeling from what I'm doing is not there. And I need to just kind of step away from what I'm doing and just do something else. So my body tells me a lot of the time. And I think, I think we, just as human beings, we tend to just ignore what our body is saying a lot. And that's something that I've kind of come to terms with over the past couple of years. So I listen to my body more often than not. That usually kind of raises the red flag and says, hey, you're just spending way too much time doing this, or you're just so disconnected from everything or everyone, or you're writing out of a place of not necessarily anything healthy, but just like either like fear or like loneliness or whatever it may be. Yeah, my body usually tells me all the time. It's usually waving that red flag and telling me what's good for me and what isn't.
Oh, I mean, I think that's, as a therapist, that's what I hope all people could kind of experience is like being able to listen to their bodies enough to like really hear what it's trying to tell them. Because I think it's easy to fall into the trap. And I mean, Ashley, I was going to say, I don't know if you could ever fall for this, but I used to be a dog dad myself. And I think I would fall into the trap of like, oh, I'm with my dog. I'm not alone. Like my dog and I talk to each other all the time. But if I was really honest
Yeah.
with myself, I was like, actually, I think I need to be around people who actually do talk back. So, like, I mean, with Harper and you, do you kind of ever feel like there's like a sense of security, like, okay, you know what, I'm enjoying my solitude, Harper's here, this is all good, versus like, all right, I might have gone a little too far into solitude and I might be rationalizing here that it's okay for me to continue to stay in isolation, or like I might be ignoring some feelings of loneliness. Like, do you have anything there that you would kind of say is like, I know I've reached this point when?
Yeah, so I actually struggle with the opposite of not knowing when to go into solitude, which is different from when I was little. But I'm very social and I like to get out. And sometimes I use that as a way to avoid dealing with something, my feelings, whatever it is. But a lot like Billy said, my body tells me when I need to go into solitude and when I need to spend some time by myself. I'll start to get sick, or I'll just be really tired. And I know, okay, I'm burning out. I need to slow down. I need to stop. I need to take some time by myself. So I actually struggle with the complete opposite and not always taking enough time alone. But I do enjoy that time alone when I take it. I just don't always take it as much as I should.
Yeah. So, I mean, one question I'd like to ask everyone, but Ashley, let's start with you, is like, what is your like go-to like place or setting that you most easily find that solitude when you know you need it?
It's usually my bathtub.
I like it.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah, usually my bathtub or my bedroom. I have a roommate, so I usually just go hide in the bedroom with a book or a TV show, and Harper, and we just cuddle, and that's like really that, or running. Running's a big place for solitude for me too.
I love that. Get a nice little town-like run in.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Sadaf? Do you have any like go-to places that are like your happy solitude places?
In the pandemic, I moved a lot. I worked digitally, virtually, I guess. So I ended up living in a lot of different cities. So I never really had one specific like place in my house, just because I was traveling a lot. But one thing that I have realized about myself is that when I want to take alone time for myself, I always do it by a window. And I'm an extrovert by nature, an extrovert who appreciates alone time since the pandemic. And anytime I just sit in solitude with a cup of tea or my journal, it's always by a window, no matter what. And I think maybe that's because of my extroverted nature, where I really still want to see people, not engaging with me, but just outside, whether it's like birds or cars driving by or people. It brings me this peace that I'm by myself, but still connected to the world. And I only realized that when, I was home all the time. But I probably wouldn't have realized that beforehand. So it's one of the things I learned about myself in the pandemic.
I love that. I'm gonna have to try that out sometime.
Yeah,
I think in my mind, I always have to go somewhere. Like I need to like walk over to the river or something like that, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. I really like that.
In New York, it might be harder because there's a lot of distractions outside.
There's a lot of horn honking for sure. Yeah.
We'll see if that changes.
I could get some good noise canceling headphones or something. How about you, Billy? Do you have like a go-to solitude place?
That's such like an interesting question, because it's weird. I feel like my natural answer is to say my bedroom. That typically is that. But it's strange. I feel like I kind of find solitude. I'm really adaptable, so I feel like I can make solitude out of just like any place. It's really strange. So I can be in a park just walking with my dog, and yeah, I can just kind of sit down on a bench, and that's like solitude to me, and kind of close out the rest of the world. Or I could be at a library and just sit in a corner and just read a really nice book, and that's solitude. So it's strange. I find myself really adaptable, so I can make any place a place of solitude, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But typically when I'm at home, it's mostly my bedroom. I kind of just retreat to my bedroom, put on some good music, yeah, and just either read or just just chill. So it's strange. Yeah, I kind of find solitude in different spaces.
Hey, I don't think there's anything strange there. If anything, I think that's
Mhm.
like some next level Zen master stuff you got going on. So I
Yeah,
wish everyone had that. Yes, enough.
I was going to say, Billy, that kind of sounds like you have a good connection with yourself, right? Because you are the foundation, regardless of if you are in a coffee shop or a park, your foundation is you. So that solitude is connecting with yourself versus your environment, which I think is cool.
Yeah, seriously. I love that because it's like, I mean, no matter where you go, there you are
Yeah.
type thing. And
And with
I
yourself.
mean, Ashley, yeah, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if you can find that within yourself, because I think a lot of people avoid that solitude because they're afraid to like be alone with their thoughts. And I think Ashley, you're kind of bring that up before. And
Mhm.
I mean,
Yes.
in terms of kind of like the good parts, like the mental health benefits that do come from achieving solitude, like do you have any like things that are like this is absolutely why it's necessary to find that solitude?
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of mention that Billy said he's able to find that in a coffee shop or walking your dog. I feel like that's probably one of the best ways to like slowly ease into that transition is maybe go to a place where there's other people, but you're spending that time alone, so you don't feel so lonely, but you're not interacting with others. So it's kind of like you're dipping your toes in the water a little bit, whether that's like taking a book to a restaurant or a coffee shop or something like that, or going on for a hike by yourself. At least I've found that that's kind of an easy way to step into it. Um, and and I mentioned that, and I forgot your question. What was your question again?
So like in terms of like what would you say are the main kind of
Benefit.
benefits that you see out of achieving that solitude?
Yeah, for me, some of the biggest benefits mentally have just been like really being able to like go within and learn myself better, figure out who I am, what I like, who I want to be. It's taught me a lot about boundaries. Um, it's helped just kind of create a sense of peace as well. Um, I think it's really important in order to like really understand ourselves and grow as individuals to have that time alone, and realize that we don't need other people to be around in order to be happy.
Ah, I love that. Yes. Amen to that. You can
Mhm.
preach all day. I said that, I would say.
Mm.
What about you, Sadaf? Like, do you have any other things that you would say, like, are these are the major benefits, like, especially mentally speaking, like that you could get from achieving that solitude?
I think for a lot of people, being alone, whether it's loneliness or solitude, it brings feelings of discomfort sometimes. And I think growth really does happen in discomfort. So, for instance, if you are someone who's not used to having as much alone time, I'm sure in the pandemic, the silence was probably too loud sometimes. But in those moments is when you actually can hear your thoughts because you're not just constantly, having all these distractions. And that's really where growth happens because you recognize things about yourself. Like Ashley was saying, you go within, so you really just gain a lot of self-awareness. And of course, even in solitude, you don't always have to be just reflecting on yourself. Sometimes you can just be, which is also great. But I think when you're starting out, that discomfort is sometimes a barrier to continuing it and wanting to seek alone time. So if you can push to that initial discomfort, knowing that all things are temporary, right, then you can get to a place where solitude feels like peace. And that is ultimately a benefit because who doesn't want peace, right? Who doesn't want peace in their life, peace of mind, peace within themselves? It's really just kind of a goal.
Wow, yes, that is beautiful. I think that would take a lot of practice, like you were saying, but I think that is such a great kind of goal to kind of keep in mind. And I mean, I think the world would be a much better place if we could all kind of figure out that healthy balance there. Oh, for sure. Well, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but one question I always love to ask towards the end here is if you had any kind of resources or I mean, it could be Instagram accounts, it could be books, whatever, on this topic, like if you had to recommend anything, like do you have anything kind of off the cuff that you would say it's like this is something I would absolutely recommend kind of looking into if you had more questions? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in.
Well, honestly, I don't have a specific thing in mind, but I do think that social media is starting to talk a lot about loneliness as a whole. And even though we've talked about how social media is sometimes making people lonely, I do think there are still some benefits of it. Even if you look up the hashtag lonely and loneliness, there are so many different people who are kind of just being vulnerable and sharing their experiences. And that's really nice because a part of loneliness isn't just like not being around other people, not being connected, but it's also just like knowing that you're not alone in how you feel, right? Just knowing that there's other people who have the same thoughts as you, who have the same struggles as you, that can just make you feel a little bit more connected, as in like, I'm not alone. So yeah, I think social media can definitely be used for that. I don't have any particular accounts necessarily, but I think it's worth checking out the hashtag, right? But of course, knowing your boundaries, knowing your limits, taking off the notifications, but doing it intentionally, I think that could be really great. But if anyone has any recommendations for books on loneliness, I would actually love to hear those.
I mean,
Can't
I
think of any
meant to look this.
specific.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've come across some before, and I meant to try to pull some out of my library. But I mean, Billy, I think if I remember right, you've kind of touched on these topics before in your own writing, right?
Yeah, it's funny, and it's kind of just going off what Sadaf said as well. Social media, I know is yeah, like, we've been talking about how social media, has its detriments and stuff, but it's funny because I feel like there's a lot of good like writers on there, like psychologists, therapists, and just different people who you can get something new from. And it's strange because everyone is in a different phase or state of their loneliness. So it's kind of hard to just pinpoint and say like, hey, I think this account would be great for anyone who's lonely, because they might go on there, read that and be like, I'm kind of past that. Or, you know what, I don't even think I'm there yet. So I feel like it's just one of those things of kind of catering your own experience to where you're at in your journey in a way. But yeah, there's a lot of good people I've been reading. I'm just going to step off camera for 1 second. I've been reading
And
this book from Dr. Tama. She's awesome. It's
Homecoming.
Kind of talk
Yes.
a little bit. She kind of talks a little bit on loneliness and phases where you're just kind of by yourself and stuff like that. It's mostly for like trauma survivors and things like that, but I feel like everyone can really take something from it. But yeah, I can't say I have any like, specific recommendations, but I think that book is awesome. And I feel like just everyone just needs to kind of find what's on there that kind of caters to where they are in their journey and stuff.
Yes. And I mean, I actually think that's a great recommendation that you pulled out there. And I would probably wager after the last couple of years, we all collectively have been through some amount of trauma. So I don't think anyone would be disbarred from kind of qualifying for that. But yeah, I think that's a wonderful recommendation. And I can't believe it, but we've already come up to our time here for today. And I cannot thank you guys so much for just being a part of this and sharing your thoughts on it. As a reminder, this has been recorded, so we can all come back to it in case you want to revisit any parts of it or share any of it. We're going to be sending out an email later with the links to the recorded session, but also the links to our panelists here, our lovely panelists that were able to kind of be the experts with us today. And just as a reminder, help is available for mental health support through group therapy with Grouport. You can go to grouporttherapy.com to find your new group, as well as other resources. Thank you again for coming out to our group chat. We hope that you'll be able to join us. We're hosting these about every other week or so, and part of a whole live discussion series. So keep an eye out for more topics with these mental health advocates and thought leaders and clinicians, and look forward to breaking down more relatable mental health topics with you all. So have a great rest of your day, and take care, guys. Bye now.